Good morning. Do you know HBCUs represent only 3% of all the colleges and universities across US? Yet, they produce 20% of all African American graduates each year. They produce 50% black doctors and lawyers and 80% of black judges. When COVID hit, we know the entire industry was impacted. 56% of schools, universities had a backup plan through online education. HBCUs collectively were at 20%. Do you know how much HBCUs collectively contribute to our annual economy? Any numbers? You'll be amazed. It's 16.5 billion. Yes, billion. Still, HBCUs receive 7 times lesser endowments than all the predominantly white or PWI institutions. Now, the story that you are going to hear today with us, the story about our cloud journey with UNCF, United Negro College Fund, about building a one-of-a-kind, first-time virtual edtech platform called HBCUv. That just will tell you that this state of doing and delivering more with less is no longer acceptable by the HBCU community. The innovation, the collaboration, and all the journey that we will share with you today will help you with at least one key takeaway, the secret sauce, or the overall formula that actually worked and is working as an effective strategy to help and to develop those unserved communities across the nation. Do you know what is the average graduation rate of all these HBCUs combined? 35%. What if by re-engaging this 65% of this community through HBCUv platform, we can change that ratio and that endowment model? Welcome, and thank you for joining us here. I am Amitava Kumar. I'm a cloud engineering higher ed focused leader within our Deloitte. And today, I'm supposed to be here with our client Ed from UNCF, who might join us in a few minutes. But I'm also here with my colleague Brian, who's going to take us through the specific data journey, walking us through all the various data sets, KPIs, and all the metrics that we have captured and as we have went live in January 2024 to give us that 360-degree view of our students' outcomes so that we can actually, in future, serve them more and also help UNCF and all these HBCU institutions that are participating with us in the journey to actually build a shared data service model. So when you think about overall higher education, right, many of the solutions are typically like siloed, and there is no integrated, unified data platform that will help us with all of these data that you are seeing up in the screen in terms of having a single institution view. Think about a overall problem statement where we have a student record that exists in multiple institutions, and the primary ID, the primary key, can be different. Example, we have the financial aid system that typically generates from the student's home institution, but it must actually have an aggregated view from other institutes to develop that single record of the financial aid. So this type of complexities, when we look at and across one single institute, so think about the challenges that we have faced when we have multiplied that for the 8 pilot institutions when we went live this January. And the plan is to incorporate all the 100+ HBCUs in the next few years. Before we walk into the data management or data section, I would like to highlight a little bit about our overall solution architecture and our point of view towards delivering and developing this. Now, back in the day, around 2021, when we started this journey, Deloitte and UNCF, they spent some time to develop the overall solution architecture, understanding from all those various tools available in the market, how we can put all of these together to help develop a seamless student experience. So we started asking a few questions to ourselves. Why would a student want to get onto this platform? The answer is, of course, they would like a virtual experience where they can take multiple courses. And think about if I am a student from one of these institutions, and if I have like an ambition of becoming a data analyst, data scientist in future, and if I do not get a Data 201 type course in my home institution, how fun it will be if I can be the student of my home institute and I able to take a course from another HBCU staying on the same HBCUv platform. So LMS is the first point of our overall solution architecture. Next, we looked at, okay, the students are now here. Now why will they want to stay on the platform? What we have to do? So then we thought that, okay, along with this overall cross-registration, course articulation, let's build an overall engagement platform, something that the students will thrive, they will find their tribe, they will feel interested to stay there, almost like when we actually went into our usability study, they wanted like a LinkedIn for Black higher education. And when we had all of that, there was a need for having a 360-degree view of all the data. So when we were going through identifying all these various partners who will be participating in this journey with us, we engaged Coatly. Now it is Parchment, and now I think it's also taken over by Instructure. So Coatly helped us to get done with that whole course articulation and cross-registration techniques. For the overall users, the students, we contacted various other partners, and then we selected Pathify, who actually is responsible for all the engagement data that today you can see on the platform. Third, for everything around customer identity access management and SSO within the platform, because we wanted this to be a seamless user experience for the students. So we invited a couple more our SIAM partners, and we selected Okta for that. And last but not the least, to control and have overall consent and privacy management, we brought in OneTrust. So now if you go into this overall reference architecture from left to right, you will see that the three types of users, the personas, I mean, from the students, from the HBCUv admin, and the faculties and the teaching assistants, they will be interacting with the platform through the front-end React, coming in through hbcuv.org. That is live. You can go and check today after this session. And then that is all hosted on AWS Amplify. I'll not get into too much of details of that, because there is actually another session this afternoon where I would highly encourage all of you to join, because we will be discussing the front end of this platform there. Now, moving along, what I was talking earlier about the data. So when you are actually talking about getting all the SIS data from all these various different institutions, getting it onto the platform, and developing a canonical model based on a common data architecture that will work for our platform, as well as for the daily updates that happens from these various institutions through their SIS, we wanted to have a strong enterprise service layer. So we had brought in several Deloitte enhanced models and also some data starts like Blueprint to actually help develop some of those like glue in between these various systems that are sitting outside the overall HBCUv's perimeter, but still connected heavily throughout that layer. And getting all of that data within our platform for the operational data that we are getting day to day with the students and the faculties coming in and using this, the overall system, coupled with the learning data that is coming from the Canvas LMS, along with that the academic data that is coming from SIS, and overall engagement data that is coming through the rich profile experience that we're going to talk about a little bit later. All of this that you just heard actually then gets into the overall underlying ESB layer, and that then gets persisted within our backend database, where we have actually done a basic framework of a shared services data model in future through data lake formation. Now, as we move on to the reporting or to the analytics portions of it, we wanted to highlight a little bit about the data processing architecture piece from that overall solution architecture. Now, when I talk about data, right, it's about transformation. Now, transformation, like governance, right, we all know there are two aspects of it. The small t transformation, as we all know, like overall looking at the data, looking at how the technological chops were being applied, how overall it flows from end to end. But the big T transformation, that means if we have to have a comprehensive agreement, a data agreement between all the HBCUs, and how we need to work together as a team with them, overall understanding of the operating model, the business model, all of that was actually UNCF's core team's effort, that we all came together as a team and delivered this. Now, from an AWS services standpoint, we actually brought in a limited set of data, because obviously, as you can understand, all these HBCUs will not open up their entire database to us. So we just looked at somewhere around 12 to 15 data sets that we will need, the attributes. We brought in those data elements. And then we worked and looked at all of their data structures, because they are on various different versions of SIS. They are at various different types of SIS. Now, when we are bringing it in, we have to standardize that. We used the AWS Data Brew for that, persisted in the RDS instances, made use of all, like at least 80 to 90% serverless architecture, so that we can scale in the economy of scale, keeping our NPO clients in mind. And then finally, when we arrived at a point where we have an end-to-end architecture laid, when the data came in, then we started to think about how we can deliver and develop machine learning, how we can apply some of those like techniques around AWS personalized or data stage, or later on, if we can develop some AI patterns in future, we would like to do some more POCs around all the latest and greatest AWS offerings for AI. So keeping all of that in mind, we would like to go towards explaining a little bit about those data sets and some of those KPIs that we developed. But now, since I see that our friend Ed has joined, I would like to go back to the overall journey and have you guys first look at some of the screenshots and some of the areas of the system first before we talk more on data. So without any further ado, let me call on stage Ed Smith-Lewis, the Senior Vice President of UNCF.
Oh, well, I'm sorry I'm late. I thought 10:30, man. It might be 10:30, not that you're on at 10:30. So my apologies, 100%. Super excited to be here. HBCUv is game changing. The back end, I'm like, ooh, it's a whole lot of boxes and a lot of dotted squares. But overall, what we've created with HBCUv, we fundamentally think will be game changing for HBCUs. When we set out to do this work, we asked the question of our team at the United Negro College Fund, how can we propel HBCUs into a technological future that allows them to thrive as opposed to perhaps demise. And our president and CEO put it bluntly. He said, you can't just simply believe in it. You gotta do it. And that's what we did. And we've been on a journey now for, I don't know how many times, it's been 4 years almost. And we really appreciate the dedicated teams from Deloitte who've helped us get to this place. But the reality is that it was in that imagination that you gotta believe it and you gotta do it, that HBCUv came to be. And when we first started with the question, we said, well, technology for most people means adoption. Adoption of a tool, adoption of a product. It also means, for many people, isolation. That technology removes you from the community that you can have, need, or deserve. And for many HBCUs, adoption has been a challenge with technology, and community was their bread and butter. And what we found was this sort of gap in both the capability to adopt the technologies, that's partially due to years of being under-resourced, and as low-resource institutions not making investments in keeping up with technology, and technology continues to accelerate in a way that fundamentally required us to think differently about how we approach the work because of the adoption issue. But perhaps more importantly, had us think differently about what does it mean to build community on a platform. And community for us started at the very beginning. We invited 9 HBCUs, not 1, not 2, not my recommendation of 3, but 9 HBCUs to participate in a co-creation process with our team from Deloitte. You saw Pathify, Okta, and Quotely, now Parchment, now Instructure. We brought all of those people to the table and we said, well, how would we imagine this platform serving our community? The institutions that are challenged with adoption and the students that are yearning and needing a community. What resulted from 3,300 hours of research was 7 fundamental solutions that we think will shift how people think about HBCUs. The first, the yard, the place where people come and experience the institution at its core. We call it organized chaos on our platform. Here, we try to reinvent the secret sauce of an HBCU, that community that they build in an online environment. The second, the course catalog, perhaps the reason why we started this work in the first place. How can we allow our institutions, low resource in nature, to share courses, build their capacity to do online, and to do so in a way that perhaps allows them to open their course catalog to institutions beyond their walls? Number 3, my path. Fundamentally understanding that our students needed resources. They needed access to supports to really engage in the learning environment. The tech collaborator. The opportunity that because we're connected, and you saw, we're connected to the SIS. Thomas said 14 data elements today. Our hope is that we get to 100,000 data elements, that we get full access to the institutions over time. And with that kind of power, that kind of connectivity, real opportunities to do digital shared services. Open Academy, that once we build our catalog appropriately and we close that online learning gap for our institutions, that we can actually open up their learning process to the world. The Faculty Lounge, that will allow our faculty to collaborate in a virtual environment, train them up to do technology well, but also allow them to co-create courses and perhaps even co-deliver them. And the Innovation Lab, how do we spark new ideas, new innovation, and perhaps new products? That resulted in something that was fundamentally beautiful. Now, I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to show this to you because I myself have not seen a digital learning platform look this good or do all the things that are necessary for our students, really engage them in their learning process. This is a picture of the yard. We call it organized chaos. It's the welcome page to HBCUv. It's where students navigate through to perhaps the most important piece, which is the course catalog. You heard about Pathify and Parchment and the work that they're doing that allows a student to look at a course catalog across multiple institutions and instantaneously register. Gone are the papers and triplicate that you have to take to 3 different offices to get it all signed and done, and then you have to take the class, get the grades from the other school, and bring it back to your institution, and hope that faculty member that was still there and approves it is still there and says yes. But now we know, a student knows immediately, here a Johnson C. Smith student knows immediately that they can take a class at Clark Atlanta University. And my path, perhaps the most important part for this group to understand, my path can take data and put real information at the fingertips of our students. It's going to be that real information that allows them to understand where they are on their journey, what they need to do next, perhaps what they could be and not even know it yet. But we see my path currently as a resource hub. In the future, and you're going to hear from the Deloitte team about all the roadmap ideas that we have, that it could take the data that we're ingesting from the institution, take the data that the students are creating in the platform, and fundamentally shift what outcomes are for our institutions. At the end of the day, to do that kind of work effectively, it has been a tremendous partnership. We're really excited about our partnership with Deloitte. We're excited about what those partnerships could do, particularly with a platform like Canvas that can allow us to really expand the online learning catalog for our institutions and what they can do from a resource standpoint that they wouldn't have fundamentally had access to had it not been for the collaboration and the effort of HBCUv bringing institutions together. We currently have 9 institutions in our design work. 6 have signed our comprehensive consortium agreement. We see them bring on 6 more in 2025, but our ultimate aim is every HBCU is a teaching institution on HBCUv, and every institution and or learner can access HBCUv in the future because what you can learn from our institutions can benefit us all. So super excited to be here. Again, my apologies for my tardiness. I'm going to turn it back over to Amitala.
Thank you. All right, can we have the screen again back up, please? So we heard Ed speaking, and the only thing that you might have caught in that whole spin was the word data. So next, I would like to invite Brian Hogerbrook, my colleague, who will walk us through how did we even get there with all the challenges that we know today exist within higher ed, and especially in making all of that times the 7 and 100+ that Ed and the UNCF team ambitions.
All right, thank you, Amitava. Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here, be a part of this long journey working with Ed and UNCF. Part of my background, spent over 20 years now in higher education. So started out of college, wanted to become a computer programmer, got really involved in student information system, learning management system, student success, data warehousing, bringing all this data together. So my journey, 20 years, of course, this is just one of the best projects I've ever been a part of. Over that course of my career journey, and now at Deloitte, I support, again, our higher ed practice from a data analytics. I also support our customer service, digital contact center. I lead our AI and automation for our contact centers nationally. But throughout that journey, data has been an important piece. Most of you, if you're familiar with higher education, you understand the challenges, even within a single institution, getting students registered, getting that financial aid processed, making sure they have the right schedule. Are they taking things that won't count towards graduation? How do you pay attention to student success, helping them succeed? Oftentimes, you've seen sort of basic predictive models to try to get students engaged. There's a lot of data challenges in higher education, both from a quality perspective. Any of you familiar with student information systems, you know that there's a real lack of sort of data validation. Every academic college can do things differently. You can have cross-listed courses. How do you count them? Where do you get a source of truth from of how many credit hours are generated per department, per college, per faculty member in some cases? So a lot of those data challenges exist even within a single institution. So imagine the challenge that UNCF faced. We're now trying to bring together 9 institutions with the plans to grow to 100. On top of that, you have sort of these silos in higher education. So yes, the SIS is really core for enrollment data. But as you heard Ed and Amitava mention, they're looking at the learning factor of this. So even looking at Canvas, but now thinking about not just, hey, how do you log into this new innovative solution to take courses, but now how do we measure that learning experience to, again, make sure that we help students reach their goal of graduating, getting to the workforce, whatever their journey is and whatever their goals are, how do we now bring this data to? The other piece of this you've heard of the yard is that engagement piece. Oftentimes in higher ed, you may have student affairs with one system, campus recreation may have a different system. Every department got their own different system. What UNCF is doing is how do you bring all this data together, create that seamless experience, but most importantly, from a data perspective, how do we now begin to track not just their course registration, not just credit hours, but how are they learning? Where can we do more engagement? Are they not getting engaged in the platform? How do we now be more proactive in helping them get engaged, that sense of belonging? When you think about why students drop out of college, it's not just because of bad grades. It can be anything from well-being, their sense of belonging, not being able to get engaged. What UNCF has done is now start thinking about how do they create a platform where we can now track all of these data points and now begin to really become more proactive, but more importantly, continue to be able to offer that personalized approach when it comes to their education. When we look at these enterprise data management strategies, there are really three key points that we really think about. Again, the unified SIS integration. And we take this approach not just in higher education, but from a Deloitte perspective, any client that we work with, or this is a state agency, any organization, it's a very similar approach. But when it comes to higher education, we start by looking at that unified SIS in this case. Sometimes some data, because we are bringing in faculty data, it may also extend over into the ERP, understanding, hey, what are these faculty roles? Some students may be working on campus, so that may be also tying in some of the HR finance systems to understand that information. From an enterprise data management, again, we're now taking this data. So imagine the student registering or their home institution, they can now register at any of the other 8 institutions right now. We have to orchestrate that data, not just within a single institution, but now send this data between institutions. So from a financial aid, of course, that was one of the biggest challenges here. You can only really get that financial aid package at one institution. So when we now allow students to cross-register, you now must not only submit their application record at that teaching institution, now this data has to be synchronized through this platform. Another challenge you face when you think about these complex integrations is, well, what if I drop my course outside of this HBCUv platform because this data is being synchronized to the SIS? That's, again, another challenge where data is constantly being synchronized, both from the HBCUv platform, but now all of these connected institutions, so this full orchestration. Second part of this, when we look at this second piece of enterprise data management, you've heard Amitava and Ed mention the elements, so using Canvas. So now all of this registration data is now going to a single instance within that Canvas. So again, creating that centralized HBCUv ID. And again, I'm familiar with a lot of the SISs out there. For Banner, it was the PITM, I think Oracle or Campus Solutions. It was the Impel ID, things like that. So all of these systems have different IDs. Well, now we have to create a unique ID, even from a faculty side, not just the students, but even the teaching faculty within HBCUv. That becomes part of this canvas. But then once you have your grades, once you have these information, that data now have to be remapped back to all these different point solutions at the institution. The last piece here in our framework is automation and insights. Again, data alone is not enough. When you think about student success, whether it's understanding registration, oftentimes we think about data in higher education. We think about, I need a dashboard to show how many students I got. Credit hour production, when you're thinking about budgets and how much revenue, tuition revenue you may have. When we look at automation and insights, though, it's really now being more connected to how do we help students succeed? So no longer just thinking about, credit hours or enrollment or, which majors they are coming in from, But now, how do we take that data to really drive action? How do we put it in the hands of those who are on the ground, whether it's putting data in the hands of faculty, the advisors, those student success professionals, financial aid advisors. Again, how you've heard Ed mention, this village approach to what HBCUv means. This is where these automations and insights come into place, especially if you've seen with this conference, leveraging some of the new AI insights. We leverage quick sites. You can now do Amazon Q4 data as well. So think about now more ways we can now build these capabilities to understand data. When we think about the data model for HBCUv, again, looking across all these different dimensions, again, the typical things here on the left, your operational and registration, again, your basic credit hours, credit enrollments, things you typically see from a higher ed perspective. Where HBCUv has really taken a leap forward is really figure out how do we now bring in and complete that picture of that student journey by really now looking at the learning and engagement factors as well. And again, this is an iterative process. The approach that HBCUv and UNCF has is really forward thinking, and starting out of the gate, we're not gonna build 100 different models, but the vision there was we need to begin collecting this data now so that as we generate, as we expand, we can now go back and have all this historical data to build more AI models. As new generative AI capabilities come about, we have that historical data now to build upon. So even from a learning management system, looking at how often are students logging in? Are they completing their work on time? Are they being engaged in not only the engagement platform, but also those records within that learning management system? Same thing for engagement. How are they being engaged within this HBCUv platform or this yard? Are they connecting with other students? Are they participating in certain social groups or events? Being able to truly now measure this experience, we can understand where we're seeing successes, where do we need to invest more time, more energy, more resources, but also understanding how do we further personalize the experience. All of us went to a college or university. All of our experiences are unique. What's successful for one may not be successful for others. So how do we continually really evolve this to now be very forward thinking there? When it comes to dashboarding, so I know a lot of you may have seen a lot of the sessions here talk about data, dashboards, insights. For us, we don't just want to give somebody a report. You shouldn't just see, hey, we got 10,000 students registered today. A KPI, every dashboard should have a purpose. I should never just see a KPI of 10,000 students, for example. Was that good or bad? For us, having a very strategy of how we present information, and for us giving out information, you think about the modality, it's not just a pretty report on a dashboard. Sometimes it may be a email to an advisor, hey, this student seems to be falling behind. It would be good for you to reach out to this student. So that's, again, where we're thinking about that, making the data actionable. But when we design dashboards, we begin with this concept of a launch pad. I shouldn't have to give somebody 50 links to say, okay, if you want enrollment, click this link, or if you want to get credit hours or LMS reports, go here. We have one central dashboard, what we call this landing spot or the launch pad, where you now go to one location, you can now access any data you want, whether it's from an executive level, or if you need to get down into the details at a student level or course level, we want to make sure you can do that. But making it a very seamless user experience, but then behind the scenes, even leveraging, say, Canvas or some of these other point solutions, leveraging those platforms as well to do automation, auto notifications, things there. Within each dashboard, I just kind of look to the right here. So some of the dashboards we do, academic learning engagement, financials, ERP. So one thing when you think about a cross-registration platform like UNCF, obviously there's going to be some cost sharing, especially when you have home institutions, teaching institutions. So there is another financial model where you do need specific data and reports for that. Each dashboard, however, should also have a strategy. Every dashboard we build here on the right has about at least 5 pages. At a minimum, the overview, exec summary, informed insights, exploratory, and data export. I'm going to probably go from bottom up. So data export. This is going to be where you may have institutional research, other data sciences at an institution. There are some users, no matter how well you build a dashboard or insights, they just want that data. They have their own tools that they use and they want to, manipulate it themselves. So yes, we want to make sure that we can also give the institutions and those users that data. Exploratory is just what it sounds. How can we put data in the hands of users, particularly when you think about advisors, faculty, those people that are on the ground? How do we allow them to now navigate and get access to data to uncover new trends that maybe the executives and those at a higher level may not be thinking about? Informed insights. This is one that's really important because it needs to be very specific. Every KPI, every chart, graph, you name it, on an informed insights page should have a very specific purpose to a user. Whether it's helping them make a decision, take any actions, there you have it. Executive summary and overview. This again is really thinking about those executives. They need to know what are those key KPIs driving the organization. Are they winning or losing? Are you hitting your targets or not? So every dashboard again follows this same concept. So if I put out a new dashboard, a user can easily understand what they're looking at, where they need to go. So again, now we think about this user experience. Again, it's really about how do users consume information. Usually when I talk to a CFO or anybody in our financials department at a university, they don't care about how pretty a dashboard. They just want an Excel table with the numbers and they can take it and go from there. So again, knowing who your audience is, but making it where those users can consume data. Amelia Parnham, who's the president CEO of NASPA, she has a book, everybody's a data person. And it's true, we all use data, but how do we make this data where even somebody who's a staff member, student support, they may not be used to data or technology, but let's give it to them in a way that they can take that data and make positive actions in helping students support their journey. Here's a list of when we think about a higher ed framework for dashboards. These are sort of 12 main categories of where we typically implement data. What we don't have here is sort of more of the research side of the house. But from a typical enrollment management strategy, looking at enrollment data, course data, financial data, student success, but also what you'll see and sort of within UNCF's vision is really thinking about that responsible stewardship, their competitiveness, and most importantly, that community impact, how they're impacting the communities they serve. So again, really thinking about a dashboard strategy. How do you organize your reports? But again, thinking about that vision, your dashboarding strategy, every report, every dashboard should fit into one of these buckets. So when you build that framework, that launch pad, a user can now easily and seamlessly find the data they need. How did we get there? You've heard about a lot of these data challenges. Amitava went through that technical architecture earlier. The first goal we had to do is really think about, once we gather all this information now, how do we make sure that we can create a student doesn't get duplicated? How do we make sure that our data, the ETL processes, were in fact done in a robust way? Getting data from different institutions, we faced a lot of where the business rules were different. You think about institutions, multiple institutions, their terms are going to be different. Start date, end dates are going to be different. Their structure of how they code a term code, for example. All of those things we had to really take into account when creating this integration. It was one thing to say, hey, let's create a data connection to a SIS. The other thing was all those complex business rules now have to map to a single platform, as well as it's bidirectional. So again, students can register through HBCUv, that data must get pushed back, as well as we're constantly gathering changes from those SIS platforms themselves. The SIS platforms, if a student goes to a teaching institution, there's admissions data that must be now synchronized between the institutions. So the API integration that we work with Instructure on, or Quotely that's now in Instructure, was a very sort of one of the biggest sort of data mountains that we had to overcome in the initial stages. From there, it would become the data management and data governance. Again, you have so many different business rules when it comes to registration, financial aid, when students can select courses, when can they transition away, or when can they drop courses, that drop add period. All of those things had to be discussed with all the institutions to come up with that process. Data governance now, especially in this AI, Gen AI age that we're in now, that becomes a new importance. How do we responsibly use the data, particularly when you're thinking about learning data from an LMS, engagement data, what students are doing within this platform, having a very strong data governance process, and it becomes more active now in this age of AI that we're in, where your data governance and quality processes become more routine as you constantly expand. And then lastly, I won't spend time here, is the dashboards and analytics. All of this data being generated in this platform, UNCF and those participating institutions have access to now really measure that student journey and really impact the students they serve. What I'm gonna go through here next, go through pretty quickly here, just some examples of the framework that we use when we build dashboards. This one here is particularly around student success. And so again, every chart, every graph, we wanna make sure that it serves a purpose. If you're looking at demographics, program enrollments, always having those comparisons. Are you up? Are you down? Are you hitting the goals that you sought out to? That's very important, that how we build dashboards and share with our users. Here's an example, just a very high-level example of when we talk about that launch pad. Being able to go from a starting point, launch into different dashboards. Typically when we build a dashboard, it's gonna be either a strategic dashboard or what we call a functional/operational dashboard. Strategic dashboards are just what they say. They're for executives. They're really tied to strategic plan. So everything in your strategic plan should be measurable. Here on that strategic side, we want to make sure that those things are measurable. One of our clients, they like to use a football analogy. They say a dashboard should be like a football scoreboard. When you look at that scoreboard, you know whether you're winning or losing. It should be that clear and simple. And so our strategic dashboards are very focused in on those KPIs, but every time we put a KPI on a dashboard, you can click on it, drill down, go to another level deeper. So while they start off with just, in this case, 6 KPIs, each of those KPIs are linked to several dashboards to where you can now continuously drill down. Versus, again, a functional dashboard is really for a certain persona. We think about operational as well. So we think about academic, faculty. There's also sort of an operational, how do you serve students? One example is your help desk or your one-stop shop call centers in higher education. Whether it's applicants trying to come to an institution for the first time or students trying to register and having trouble, being able to now measure those experiences well. What if you have a student who we see access the HBCUv site, but then they made a phone call about registration, but we noticed that they never got registered? Well, maybe that becomes an input for somebody to now reach out to make sure, hey, we saw you took this action but didn't complete it. Is there anything we can do? So now leveraging call center data as well, these operational data points are just other examples of ways you can now be more proactive, but also understanding where you can be. In this example, this was one client we worked with where, and if you're all familiar with, say, the admissions or financial aid processes in higher education, sometimes many institutions, you're on hold for 45 minutes before you can speak to someone. Again, leveraging data now, leveraging AI, we can put even more self-service options in there. And in this case, it was more self-service and optimization to where we can eliminate and reduce those hold times significantly. Here again is one example of that executive summary. Again, those KPIs, all of them you can drill down to. Again, persistence rates, when we think about how students are progressing through, we want to be able to measure that, measure their progress, measure how they're going through there. Now on the right side here, I know they're all negative numbers. I did that intentionally, but even if they were all positive, it doesn't mean that, oh, we're winning, we're hitting our metrics. You should, you just ignore that. we want to provide that capabilities where you can still drill down. I've seen institutions where, yes, they were exceeding their retention goals, but when you drilled down, you saw that there were certain populations of students, certain demographics where, hey, although you're succeeding, you're over 80%, here's a population where their retention rates was under 50%. But because they were just focused on that one KPI, they didn't see that there were still further improvements that they could make. So making sure that all your information is connected in a way to tell that story is going to be very important. One thing we also see and we work with a lot of our clients is those workforce trends. So yes, we want students to graduate, but what you're seeing now, even in a lot of states now, is they want to know not just how many students you're graduating, but what is the workforce impact that they're doing? What are they doing beyond that graduation? And so part of our work as well is in future thinking, and what we've done with some of our clients now is tie in that workforce data. So we've even done this now in a few states where we're analyzing the impact that institutions have when it comes through the workforce. If you heard Amitava starting out, just that financial impact that all of the HBCUVs have economically in this country. So again, this is an important metric where you're thinking about not just the data that's generated in the institutions, but also partnering with those workforce initiatives as well. And this last one here, again, this is what you typically see, term enrollment analysis. What are our enrollment trends? Within UNCF, within this data architecture, we can see this day by day because we're constantly synchronizing this data. We can analyze these enrollment trends, and what you heard Ed mention about being that service provider for HBCUVs, really now looking at that sort of at a system level, seeing how institutions are leveraging the HBCUV platform, but students can also take courses at their home institutions outside of HBCUVs. So this whole ecosystem can now really be, just a cross data platform to see the impact that students are having being enrolled in these courses, data courses that they're transferring in from other places. It truly now really amplifies what you see from an enrollment management perspective at a system level. The beauty of this one, I want to transfer now back to Amitava to really now think about as well how we can now, again, we talked about AI briefly earlier, but how do we now specifically look at AI on top of all of this data from a higher ed perspective?
Which data session these days are complete without a mention of the keyword generative AI? Okay. Well, I also wanted to kind of take credit and also give credit to the team to start thinking of it ground up. As I was going through the basic architecture, the data architecture, the team has been thinking and have thought about that since the initial days of design. Now, if you see generative AI has impacted almost all the business areas, and same with higher ed, right? 70% of the students, according to the latest reports in April of last year, they want some form of generative AI course in their curriculum. 72% of the faculties have already started to use Gen AI in some way, shape, or form as part of their daily academic cycle. Research says 20 to 30% of all the work, administrative work, the day-to-day chores, whatever the faculties and the teaching assistants do, that can be replaced with any AI tool, so that that amount of time they can actually spend taking the course in a high-touch environment with the students, guiding them, and do all sorts of advancement in their curriculum. Now, the whole goal in here for at least HBCUV with UNCF since day one has been how we can apply some of that Gen AI applications with respect to the overall strategy that UNCF has in mind towards this platform. Like if you talk a little bit about higher ed AI in specific, right, you'll see those 4 blocks that you are seeing. It revolves around like either it is the overall teaching, learning, or the student success factors, the KPIs that Brian was touching upon on all those dashboards, and then overall research and innovation. And last but not the least is day-to-day operational excellence. Now I know, like we just in January we went live. We are working to work with all these 6 different institutions to put on courses. It's a journey, right? But the framework is there, and then we are sitting with UNCF every day to understand where their priorities are, right? When you align the overall journey of artificial intelligence with the organization, you'll see that today in the curve, or in the growth curve, UNCF thinks that the most important thing for HBCUv platform is to think about these mission statements. And not all mission areas will carry maybe equal weightage, right? Like today, student success is on top of the minds. That's why Brian took like some time to go over all those metrics that we are looking at, all those dashboards that we are looking at. But we all know that student success cannot come by itself, right? We have to work on the teaching and learning areas first. We have to work on loading the courses first, teaching and making sure that the faculties know this new way of teaching, the course rubrics, and all of the tool sets that come with that, right? So we have been spending a lot of time with discussions with our tech partners, like including Canvas and Parchment, Pathify, and all the LTI vendors as well, to make sure that faculty and students are actually capable of this new platform, this new pedagogy, this whole thing, that the overall like ecosystem of HBCUv. But again, every organization in their AI journey, right, follows three distinct phases. First, they explore the areas. Second is they implement, and third is when they scale. I can see and I can say that UNCF probably is more on the exploring side of the house right now because, as I said, the platform has gone live. We are actually holding convening meetings with faculties from all HBCUs. We have spent time through the UNCF Unite conferences to actually work with all these faculties, all the people who are attending those conferences, to gather some of those active use cases that will be relevant for the students and the faculties on this platform, be it overall AI tutor, be it over like the course content, the automatic yard that Ed was talking about and showing you screenshots. How cool it will be if automatically the AI tool goes and scores all the happenings and events across all those HBCUs and bring to the students on one single dashboard. Believe it or not, Morehouse has actually started a metaverse with 15 courses already. So overall, the gamut of the whole equation is that more and more use cases we can determine now. The background framework we can solidify. We can test POC some of that using AWS Personalized, looking at all the data that is coming out from these help desk tickets, looking at SageMaker, or even do a few trial with other tools that are coming from AWS. But one thing I wanted to call out, that we have talked about data orchestration, data governance, data integrity, and all of that, but data security is on top of our minds, right? With data comes power, with power comes responsibility. So with that, we are actually embedding data security in the entire workflow or entire life cycle of our development, all the way from DevSecOps practices to having a comprehensive system security plan and doing both SAST and DAST, meaning static and dynamic application code scanning, before it gets ready for the production. And of course, now that we are live, we are also working with UNCF to understand what is their incident response policy and put together a plan of doing a SOC or a NOC type arrangement in future. With that, I would like to call upon stage again back Ed and see if he has any closing comments.
Yeah, Amitabh, I'm just really excited by this. There's a well-known phrase that sort of education is the great equalizer. I fundamentally believe that. But education is no longer just sitting in a classroom today. As we talked about it today, education is about ubiquitous information that's all around us. And the big question we have with HBCUv is how can we bring that information to bear in a way that actually leads to greater student success, better teaching and learning, more innovation, more research on what it actually takes to drive greater student success, impact to communities that we say we care the most about, and most importantly, operational excellence. Many of the reasons why institutions are not leaning into the use of data isn't because of a fear of the data. It's because of an inability or a lack of capacity to see a through line. What you heard in both Brian's comments and Amitava's comments is this is a journey, and it's a journey that we're excited to be on. It's a journey that we know we're going to need partners like Deloitte, Parchment, Instructure, Pathify, Okta, Tableau, to get to the vision that we ultimately see. And that vision for us is real equity in education, but equality and educational opportunity. And we fundamentally think that HBCUv will be game-changing, not just for the HBCUs that are on the platform, but perhaps for those institutions that want to adopt the approach for their own future. So I just thank you for your time today. I thank the team for all their hard work, and I look forward to what data will do for all of us. Thank you.
Any questions? And also, please do remember to fill the surveys.